Welcome to Discograffiti, the podcast that obsessively rates and curates the greatest music of all time before the 21st century renders that music obsolete. I say no way, not on our watch. I'm your host, Dave Gebro. Welcome to Croz Part 2. In this episode, we'll be mourning the incredibly exceptional man we all know and love, named David Crosby, along with our very special guest, original co-host and man about town, Joe Kennedy. We'll learn about Crosby's work with Crosby and Nash throughout the 70s, his worsening drug dependency, and how he resuscitated his career and truly made up for lost time in the studio before he passed on. Coming up, we have Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander from the Association rating their entire stellar output, episode 1 of the John Landis tapes, and a 4-part series about the least fortunate acts that played Woodstock called We Are Stardust, We Are Over, including episodes on Sweetwater, Burt Summer, the Keith Hartley Band, and Quill. So don't go anywhere when this episode's done. Subscribe. Here's a couple terrific ways to find out what's coming up around the bend. You can join our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. We're on Instagram and Twitter too, in case you don't mess with the Zuck. Or you can write to info@discograffiti.com and sign up for our weekly hallowed email list. Lastly, the link to our legendary playlist is in the show notes and also on our website at discograffiti.com. So follow along with us chronologically as we eulogize and mourn the great loss of David Crosby to the music world and to the world at large. Tonight will be a break from the format. No ratings, no snarkiness projected at his obvious lesser works, just marveling at the wonder that was this amazing human being. Speaking of this amazing human being and some of the great works that he achieved, hey, Joe.
Hey, Dave. How's it going?
You understand because he popularized Hey, Joe.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I need to talk with you about something. You know, usually we have like an offhanded topic that we kick around before we start the meat and potatoes of the program. But tonight, you know, I really want to discuss this crushing series of blows, all these really major people dying. You know, death obviously is all around, and you can't really get away from it. Can one?
No, you cannot. You cannot escape death.
For a second, I thought I had an out somehow.
Nobody has yet managed to do it.
This, like, holy shit domino effect thing started on November 30th with Christine McVie.
Right.
The taping of this right now is January 30th. So it's in 2 months to the day we've lost Christine McVie, Angela Badalamenti, Dino Danelli from the Rascals, Terry Hall of the Specials, Jeff Beck, Lisa Marie Presley, Crosby, and then on January 28th, a couple days ago, Tom Verlaine. Now there's a lot of other people who died in there, but these are the ones who, mostly just kind of had a big effect on me. I mean, I don't remember a streak of deaths that was this crushing ever in rock history.
Yeah, well, we just taped the Crosby thing not long ago. So you're airing part 2 of it, but we taped it just a few days after he died. So, and then in the interim since then, Tom Verlaine passes away. So these are kind of both, you know, to me, like Hall of Fame kind of musicians. They're both titans, really, of, you know, completely different areas of the music business and culture at that time. Right back to back, we lose both of them. Very suddenly, I guess, in both cases.
Well, Crosby is very suddenly over the course of decades.
Yeah, Tom Verlaine, relatively young. He's 72 or something?
73.
73, right.
That one was really depressing for me. I wouldn't say I'm an obsessive because, like a lot of people, I know everything television has done and very little about his solo career. At some point soon, I'll be getting around to it. But before we actually talk about him specifically, the last few days, you know, I just got here to New Jersey to set things up on the East Coast for the show. And, you know, just sort of as a bolt of inspiration or a bolt of lightning, it's kind of a reimagining. You and I had this tagline from the beginning of the show about, you know, the objective truth about, you know, it's funny. I've said it a million times and I can't remember it off the top of my head. I started feeling like this became impetus for a recalculation of what the show is at its core. So I changed the tagline and the focus. This is not a kids get off my lawn thing, but I think with Gen Z, there's not a reverence for history.
They're going to put it in perspective, you know, like Tom Verlaine's popularity was almost 50 years ago. So Imagine if we were in our 20s in the 90s, it would be like something from the 1940s or something, you know?
Yeah, like all of a sudden we get super into the Andrews Sisters or Chubby Checker or something.
It's a little bit different because I think once the rock and roll era started, that's kind of like a modern era. It seems to be a common jumping off point for all the sort of recent generations, but we're getting pretty far away from 1970, whatever.
But do you think, I mean, obviously we can't exchange ears and hear from someone else's point of view, but does this stuff, do you think there's anything about it that feels antiquated?
No, not at all. I don't think anything about television is, I mean, I think it's, you know, you'll hear that influence of Tom Verlaine and that style of guitar playing, I think forever, really.
From all accounts, a bit spectrumy and apparently very difficult guy to be in a band with. But I'm sure there are elements of all four guys in television, or five if you count Richard Hell, that made it difficult to be in a band with them. But that first television record, you know, my opinions on television are the least controversial imaginable. Marquee Moon's a masterpiece. Adventure is a solid record, a little bit underrated. The Blow Up is a great live album. The Reformation record is okay. And that's pretty much everyone's opinion.
Yeah, Adventure kind of grows on me the older I get. I kind of find myself going back to that one a lot more just because Marquee Moon is so burned into my memory. I feel like I know every little corner of Marquee Moon from hearing it so many times, and Adventure kind of sounds like a new listen to me often because I haven't really gone back to that one as much.
The Dream's Dream has always hit me as a great song.
The third one, the reunion one that they did, what was like in the 80s or something, 1990?
92.
Right. That one never really got its teeth into me. I can't, every time I listen to it, I end up just turning it off right away. So maybe I should really give it a good hard listen.
You know, what's funny is, yeah, I saw television a few years ago, and it was a great show. Richard Lloyd was not a part of the band, so in some ways it barely counts. But I did see them 30 years ago, and I have no recollection of it. Rick Kronberg of Rick's Backyard fame, he reminded me yesterday that we saw them. They apparently were terrible, and we left. And apparently my comment was, it feels like they're playing shuffleboard. But but nothing can take away the majesty of the early stuff. And plus, if you really want to cut it down and really want to talk about the beginning of New York punk in America, it starts with Patti Smith and television.
Yeah, well, that whole style of like what became, I guess, sort of like indie rock, after that sort of clean guitar, those kind of snaky lines, that sort of, you know, style of not punk or really rock even style of guitar playing sometimes, this kind of linear style of playing that became really common after them. Sonic Youth obviously is like a obvious direct descendant, and then everything that came from that alone, it's a whole vocabulary of guitar that really came from Marquee Moon and a whole kind of direction for a certain type of music. But the record itself also, the songwriting is also really incredible.
It's staggering.
Just, you know, Marquee Moon really is the one that really has that focus and has everything that makes them great. The other one, Adventure, is kind of like where you go once you've kind of exhausted from the first one. You know?
And even the first record is not perfect. I mean, that last song, talk about a skipper.
Right.
You know, the great moments on it, and I mean 80% of it at least is perfect, is really something to marvel at. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't thoroughly depressing, because this stuff is receding into the rear view and there's really no curatorial movement on this generation's part. You know, I just was looking at some lineups of some upcoming festival shows. You know, I can't help but feel, as a music lover, just a sense of complete despondency.
Well, I don't know. I kind of work with younger musicians from time to time, and I find that those people kind of have knowledge of history, and to have it all at their fingertips is very easy to find. So if you are so inclined to know your past history and to be interested in older records, it's very easy to do that. I think there is maybe more of that than you think, at least among other musicians. Maybe not so much in the culture. I wouldn't say the interest is completely waning in those great records.
Well, that's good. I mean, you know, I know that toward that way of thinking, you just took part in a pretty massive musical event as far as bringing the Discograffiti touch to the multitudes here. I
co-wrote and played most of the instruments on the opening track to the new Lil Yachty record. The song's called The Black Seminole. And then also on the outro of the album, the last little coda on the very last song is also me, just the coda part on the last song. So the beginning and the end of the record is me, and it's gotten incredible reception, both the track and the record overall. I don't know if you saw the other day, Questlove posted about it. I think today, I think this morning. Yeah, Questlove posted a rapturous post about the record, about how it's getting him excited about music again. And so, yeah, this is a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
You play everything except for drums, including a shredding fucking top of Mount Olympus type guitar solo that is more dramatic than Slash Outside the Chapel in November Rain. And it's really a stunning piece of work. Now, I got to tell you that, sometimes you send stuff to me and, it's somebody else's work, but you're playing on it so I can dispassionately say, great job. Everything sounds good. I am not the market for Lil Yachty. And I loved the song. I loved it. There was sort of equal parts Luther Vandross and both Pink Floyd Echoes and Great Gig in the Sky. To be able to pepper his aesthetic with these kinds of things is incredibly exciting as far as toning down the "Hey kids, get off my lawn."
The track is pretty conventionally like a psych rock kind of track. It's definitely like, rock, like live band instrumentation. Then his vocal really kind of takes it into like a futuristic kind of space. It feels like when he comes in with the very saturated auto-tuned vocal, it's just, it's very, very trippy and transportive to me.
Hope to hear a lot more of that kind of stuff from you, and I'm super psyched you got to be involved with that. As Thurston Moore, once I met him at a Burger King after seeing him open for Neil Young, and Sonic Youth open for Neil Young in 1991. After talking with him for a little while, he signed my notebook, "The Kids Are Still All Right, 91." Nice. That's definitely the vibe here.
Yachty and the producers of this record, my good friend Justin Raisin's one of the producers on this, and they took a big chance making a record like this, and I think it's really paid off. It seems like there's a lot of excitement about it.
Yeah, I'm psyched to see what happens with it. And it takes a little bit of the sting out of every single person on the planet that meant something at one point dropping dead on us. They're going to keep coming. I think the next 10 years is going to be horrifying to try to take this in. But all we can do is enshrine these records, these artists, and keep passing it forward in the culture through Joe Kennedy's pen.
Right.
Yeah, onward and upward then. So, Joe, where we left off with Croz 1 was his 1971 solo LP, If I Could Only Remember My Name, and the amazing existence of the almost mythologically cool Perro, the Planet Earth Rock and Roll Orchestra. So what occurs after this is Crosby and Nash. So as a duo, these two released 4 studio albums and 2 live albums, including Another Stony Evening, which has the two of them in a 1971 acoustic performance. Besides the records they put out, the two of them had pretty lucrative careers as session musicians, and they contributed tons of harmonies and background vocals to, Joni Mitchell, Jackson Browne, Dave Mason, James Taylor, most notably Mexico, Art Garfunkel, J.D. Souther, Carole King, Elton John on Blue Moves, and Gary Wright. I mean, they were all over the place.
Sure. Yeah. They could sing.
Yeah. They were good, man. Like wind on the water. So that first record, let's talk about his contributions. He had 3 contributions to the album, Graham Nash and David Crosby. And out of the 5, I would say that 3 of them are super solid. The first track on the record that he contributes is called Whole Cloth. And I feel like that's the first song ever that he contributes to a record that's really not very good.
Well, it sort of feels like we've entered the teeth of the 1970s here. This has that after party kind of thing to it. It's sort of like we all need to cool out, man, kind of way. It has this sort of soft rock kind of creeping in. It's a little bit of kind of some jazzy MOR kind of things going on in there. So the coolness factor maybe a little lower on that one.
On that song, you mean? Or
on that song, yeah.
The strong stuff on this is fantastic. I mean, Where Will I Be is amazing. That's a
Yeah, so that song, we'll get to this, like we'll touch on this, I guess, a little bit later. He kind of like makes a comeback in the 2000s and like the teens and gets very prolific and writes a lot of songs. And a lot of those things are they're like this kind of thing, that sort of plaintive acoustic thing. Not as good as this, but in that style.
The problem for me with that stuff is that he's folding in some Steely Dan-ish vibe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So it waters down the intensity of it for me. But on the best stuff he does in his more recent records, it does away with the jazzy soft rock stuff and focuses on what he does best. Where Will I Be is super haunting.
Yeah, very pretty song.
Yeah, and then Page 43, even better. I love Page 43.
That's my favorite song, probably on any of these Nash Crosby records. That's kind of a hidden gem of a song. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Nice ballad, very nice ballad.
Games is pretty solid too.
It's okay. That's a sort of a that's a pretty standard Croz kind of drone song. Deep cut there.
It's not going to go on the playlist, but it's a solid song. The Wall song was something he'd attempted a number of times with Perro from his solo record. This is a great song. The Wall song's great.
Yeah, and it's Jerry Garcia, Bill Kreutzmann, and Phil Lesh are the rhythm section. So it may have interest to you for those reasons if you are a fan of the Dead. It's buried at the back of the album. It's like the next to last song or something.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of the feel to me if I can only remember my name, where it's kind of all about the vibe of it more so than the songwriting. But it has a very nice vibe and very nice playing.
Yeah, it's because it came out of those sessions, and you can definitely discern it. At this point, Croz is really feeling himself. At the end of 1972, the Byrds get back together for a reunion, and I think my guess is that, after they'd kicked him out so harshly, he wanted to kind of have his revenge by A, taking over everything, and B, by getting them so stoned that they couldn't really function. That, by all accounts, that's what happened. He swooped in with like mind-blowingly good weed. The Byrds reunion record is known as a colossal belly whopper.
Yeah, it doesn't really pan out. It sounds very half-hearted. It doesn't sound like the Byrds at all, really.
No, that's the main problem.
It doesn't have the magic at all.
There's one great thing about the Byrds self-titled reunion record, and that is the resurgence of Gene Clark.
Right. The Crosby songs are kind of eh.
The Crosby songs, you got Joni Mitchell's For Free, which is not his song. Laughing, which we'd already heard a better version
Much better version, right?
And then Long Live the King, which is just not a good song, really.
Yep, I have the exact words in my notes. Not a good song.
Not a good song. What happens next is CSNY reunite in the summer of 73 for unsuccessful recording sessions in both Maui and LA. Despite all this having gone down, they got together at a Stills concert at Winterland in October of 73. And this was a prelude to their tour of the summer of 74.
Very successful tour.
Very. So is this the first stadium tour?
I don't know exactly, but it's at the beginning of that era where things are moving into these giant venues and the PAs are getting more sophisticated and things of that nature. So it's in the early days of those big shows.
I remember, all kinds of notions about it without having needed to go back and research. They had like silk pillowcases that they had to have for every hotel. And then Joni Mitchell had painted this thing that had to be embroidered on every pillowcase, I believe. Real serious bloat.
Some brown M&M shit.
They didn't have a new record to push. After the tour, they attempted to record a new record, which was going to be called Human Highway, but apparently just constant bickering, really unpleasant, and the album was canceled. Instead, what comes out is a greatest hits. So you have two albums and a greatest hits. That was baffling to me from as far back as I can remember.
It's amazing they really got anything done. The amount of egos that are involved and the personalities that are involved. Mainly Croz. He's mainly the one that's the hardest to deal with. It's not that surprising. They're so massively successful and they all have their own interests and, everyone's high on drugs, and not surprising in retrospect that they couldn't hold it together that well. It's kind of easier to go on the road and, go play a show every night than to try to create something together is a lot more stressful, I think.
In all fairness, and I think Crosby would be the one probably to not only agree with this, but to bring it up, is that he was lazy.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you want to call it. I don't know.
He wasn't prolific, let's say, but he was probably, in all likelihood, he was probably, quote unquote, enjoying his success too much to be a consistent writer. But to me, it never really mattered because because, most of the time when he would shoot for the stars, he'd hit them. Wind on the Wire is the first place where things get kind of wobbly for me. He's got a couple really good contributions, but there's 6 songs that he has a hand in writing. 2 of them co-writes, 4 solo songs, and there's only 2 of them I really care about. Carry Me is a classic.
That's the highlight of the album.
Yeah, it is the highlight of the album.
So it has the big soaring chorus. That's cool. They're kind of getting into wallpaper mode here in this one.
Yeah, they are. And even the good stuff is still, there's a turn and it kind of feels like MOR singer-songwriter stuff. Even Naked in the Rain, which is, to me, the only other good song that Crosby contributed, and it's a co-write with Nash. This is kind of the beginning of his jazzy soft rock era.
Yeah, well, the band on I really appreciate the musicians on this record. This is classic 70s session guy, Danny Korchmar, Russ Kunkel, Leland Sklar, David Lindley. They're heavily featured, especially David Lindley's guitar playing. He has a lot of kind of solo spotlight moments. The record is cool in that regard. I really love that kind of stuff, that kind of playing. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but yeah, great players on this. But yeah, there's a sort of like a sameness to a lot of this, and it is getting into the jazz bow MOR kind of easy listening kind of
not
zone.
Going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And one thing I would like to point out is that I believe Homeward Through the Haze is a real sad waste of a great song title.
Yeah, that one seemed like it's kind of like he's trying to do a Joni thing there and not really pulling it off. It's like it would have been a very bad song on Court and Spark or something.
Right. Not his proudest moment, but not bad. I mean, there's enough good stuff on there. In 76, you had Crosby and Nash doing their thing and Stills and Young doing their thing. And the whole thing apparently was a mess, especially Stills and Young. So what happened was they were working separately as 2 duos. They thought about retooling everything to produce a CSNY record. And unsurprisingly, that ended bitterly as Stills and Young deleted Crosby and Nash's vocals from Long May You Run. The 4 of those guys did not perform together again until Live Aid. And then after that, they only performed sporadically in the 80s and 90s. Whistling Down the Wire, that's got some great Crosby stuff on it.
Yeah, that one and the previous one, the Wind on the Water one, kind of blend together a little bit for me. Yeah, but there's good stuff on both. A lot of the same players. David Lindley again featured on this a lot. He's a really great player. Plays beautiful slide stuff and everything. There's a couple that have their nice harmonies. Broken Bird's a cool song.
I'm not a big fan of Broken Bird.
Time After Time, nice ballad.
Cool. But the 2 that stand out to me are Taken It All, which to me is a towering, tremendous achievement. And I don't know why it's not mentioned more often. I think it's the best ever Crosby Nash co-write.
Yeah, I could see that. That one has some of the CSN kind of magic to it. The harmony blend and the style of chords. You could envision that one on one of the CSN records.
And it was performed by them. There's extant versions of the 3 of them doing it, and it's gorgeous. It's not as good as this version, but it's a great song. And then,
that one has a little bit of the old magic, I would say.
Yeah. I think it has all of the old magic. Dancer is an instrumental, 5-minute instrumental, again from the Tamalpais High at about 3 songwriting book. Right. So you got like scatting, even growling happening in it. And I think Dancer is a worthwhile follow-up to that kind of songwriting. It's great.
Yeah, the players, again, are all really good. A lot of big showcase for David Lindley in that as well. So yeah, these guys are all, it sounds like they're having fun playing. All the top call guys.
That was 1976. Now we're in 1977, and the very long-awaited CSN record comes out. All 3 of his contributions are hitting our playlist. I like everything he did on this. It's not as good a record as the work that they had previously done, but Shadow Captain is a co-write with Craig. How do you pronounce his last name? Doerge?
I don't even know. Good question.
Anyway, it's a co-write. Shadow Captain is a pretty sick co-write. It's good stuff. It leads off the record, and it's worthy of that. Anything at All, it's a bit listless and lethargic, but hey, so was he at that point. That's probably my favorite one that he contributed. It seems like the most personal one. Same with In My Dreams, another solid one.
Well, this record was massively huge commercially. It went quadruple platinum. So they really are a big thing still in 77. This is where I kind of lose interest in them a little bit. Yeah. And this is kind of like a turning point where it starts to get to be a slog for me. I think you probably like this better than I do.
No, I don't.
I don't really love this album.
I don't love this album either, but I like this album.
Yeah, it's okay, I guess. I don't know. I probably wouldn't really find myself going back to it.
There's no meaning in this. It's a collection of songs.
Yeah, it's nice to hear them sing together, and when they still have the ability to make that great harmony blend. But it's to me not really a huge artistic triumph, even though it was a huge commercial hit.
To me, this is the end of CSN, because we'll talk about Daylight Again in a second, but they continued performing live, and since 1982, since Daylight Again in 82, they released 4 albums of new material. You had in 1988 American Dream with Neil Young, then in 1990 Live It Up, 1994 After the Storm, and 1999 Looking Forward Again with Neil Young. Also, Crosby and Nash released a self-titled album in 2004. The reason why I'm bringing that up now is because we're not touching on any of those records.
Yeah, they had a couple more big hits after the 1977 album. They had Wasted on the Way, right? And then Southern Cross. Wasted on the Way was kind of a legit hit. Southern Cross maybe kind of a minor hit. Yeah, those later ones, starting with the American Dream album, I feel like kind of were pretty much ignored at the time.
I believe I never bothered listening to any of these records, because I know after a certain point, the material just doesn't have any interest for me personally.
Yeah, I remember the American Dream record because I worked at a record store at the time. That must have come out in 88 or 89, because I definitely remember when it came out.
Yeah, because there's hot dogs on the cover of the record.
The older employees would often spin that one.
Yeah. I want to mention on Daylight Again that Delta is on that one. Delta, it kind of ends Act 1 for me as far as Crosby's career goes. Delta's a really good song, I think. It's also kind of like, that's kind of it for quite a long time creatively for him.
Yeah, it's like a piano ballad. That's his one tune on the record.
Yeah.
He's not really super engaged with writing at this time.
No, but it's amazing that he was able to squeeze that out of himself at that time.
Yeah.
Then it's just life taking over, basically. At this point, he's been a junkie for years. And now it's all about the drugs. So in 1985, Croz spent 9 months in a Texas state prison after being convicted of several drugs and weapons offenses. And the drug charges, by the way, were related to heroin and cocaine. Then later in 85, he was arrested in California for drunken driving, a hit and run driving accident, and possession of a concealed pistol and drug paraphernalia.
He sort of becomes a punchline. He's sort of like a notorious public junkie, sort of like what he's known for during this period.
Yeah, during this period, he's kind of a joke. He was at least considered to be kind of a joke. In May 87, probably the most important thing that ever happened to him went down. He was 45 years old. He married Jan Dance, who was then 35. They remained together throughout the rest of his life. She seemed to be the force that he needed to, at least after he unfortunately and admittedly regrettably got her addicted to heroin along with himself. They got clean together, and by all accounts, she was like the greatest thing that ever happened to him.
Right.
In 1989, at least in title, an answer record to If I Could Only Remember My Name, Oh Yes I Can. So Yes I Can comes out. I didn't really want to talk about any of the music on it. It's not my style. 1993, Thousand Roads, another solo thing. Again, not my style. He doesn't record a solo album for a long time after that. It was actually 21 years. Croz comes out. So no music solo during this time.
For some reason, that Croz album has Wilford Brimley on the cover. I don't know how that happened.
When he said almost cut my hair, he really should have stuck to his guns.
That's a ridiculous album cover.
Boy haircut.
It's just his funniest album cover. I mean, it's the instant I saw it, I just instantly burst out laughing. Very funny to me. I mean, it's just his face, but it's like kind of this close-up picture of his face kind of fills the whole frame. He mounts a comeback though with that album, and then consistently stays recording, makes an album like every other year or two from then on the rest of his life.
Just want to talk about a few more life things that happened. In 94, he got a liver liver transplant, which Phil Collins paid for. In 97, he found his son that he had given up for adoption in 1962, named James Raymond, and, started performing with him. The best thing about the music that they created, I think, is the name of the band, CPR. Crosby had 3 other children, but, this thing where he reconnected with James Raymond seemed to be a really important piece of the puzzle for him. And then, I don't know if you know about this, Joe, I didn't until I researched it. End of 97, beginning of 98, Ethan Crosby, his brother, who had taught him to play guitar and started his musical career with him, he killed himself.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he killed himself in either late 97 or early 98. The date is unknown because Ethan left a note not to search for his body. It was found months later in May 98. In 2000, you have the whole Melissa Etheridge thing, which is so weird to me. So weird because the son that they had died at 21 years old in opiate addiction thing.
Yes, right.
It just is so sad because you're pretty much going to get the addict gene if David Crosby's your dad.
Strong gene.
If you don't, you dodged a 10-ton bullet. That whole thing is just horrible.
I wonder how much of it, like knowing that David Crosby is his father, added to the.
That's interesting
because it was publicized. It was obviously known from the time the child was born.
Well, yeah. Do you remember the cover of Rolling Stone?
I just remember it being a story. I don't remember specifically that, but I remember it being a lot of punchlines to a lot of jokes. Late night, like Jay Leno or whatever would joke about it or whatever.
In 2004, Crosby was arrested, charged with criminal possession of a weapon in the 3rd degree, illegal possession of a hunting knife, illegal possession of ammunition, and illegal possession of about an ounce of marijuana. So still getting in trouble, but he got off. How the fuck do you get off for all that?
What does he think he's going to do with the knife and the gun?
Well, he left that shit behind at a hotel room.
Still, why does he have it? What's he think he's going to do with it?
I don't know, but you would think that all the weaponry would be born from the paranoia that one gleans from addiction.
I guess so. I guess someone's going to break in and take his drugs or something.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but hey, lads and ladies, Dave Gebrow here. I abandoned my career and moved my family 3,000 miles to be able to focus exclusively on Discograffiti. And so if you're like me and enough is just never enough, then please visit patreon.com/Discograffiti and become one of our Patreon soldiers of sound. Discograffiti is an entirely listener-supported show, and it's also intended to be a 3 times a week music deep dive experience. So do us both a favor and consider giving it a shot. Trust me, I'm working hard for the money, so hard for it, honey. There's the main show on Sunday, a Thursday wildcard episode, which is either an interview with that week's guest or an offshoot show like Rock Cousteau and Queasy Listening. And then on Tuesdays, there's the humdinger of them all, Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major. You got nothing to lose. If you don't dig it after a month, you're refunded, no questions asked. Once again, that's patreon.com/Discograffiti. So, all of the renaissance of his career, all those records, I've heard them all. And there's nothing I really don't like.
I flipped through them a little bit for this, and they're all, for a guy his age who was out of the game for so long, they're all perfectly pleasant. I would think those records probably would have an audience.
I love Lighthouse.
That one, I really like the first song on that. The first song on Lighthouse, Things We Do for Love, is the favorite thing I heard out of all of those, just flipping around those. That one caught my ear kind of right away.
I like everything on that record because there's less of that jazzy soft rock thing that it seems like his son is really enamored with. James Raymond seems to love all that, and Donald Fagen and all that stuff. I don't like when he does that, but this stuff feels like a true successor to If I Could Only Remember My Name.
Yeah, it's a more acoustic based, less kind of slick, a lot of that like kind of plaintive kind of folk. He kind of hinted at this in the early 70s. The songs are all, in general, very pretty, not a lot of rough edges on them. Some good melodies here and there. It's not really for me. I appreciate that he was making them. It's inspiring that he stayed so productive in that phase of his life, that he was still that motivated to make music. They all have, I think, a real kind of level of effort to them that I think shows through.
You get a really strong sense of a guy frantically trying to make up for lost time.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all fine. Not really my thing, but they're definitely not bad.
I believe they're all fine, except for Lighthouse, which I'm going to include in its entirety on the playlist, because I think it's the best example of his latter era songwriting capabilities. He's got a couple of solo writes in there, but a lot of them are co-writes with, I think he's working with Snarky Puppy at this point.
Yeah, I know the last couple of records, I think that Snarky Puppy was involved.
Croz is 2014, Lighthouse is 2016. Then there's a record in 2017, 2018, and 2021. Pretty good use of time there. The Sky Trails in 2017, I would like to mention a song I'm going to be putting on the playlist, Home Free. And what I love about this song is it's a really soft, gentle slide into home base from all the years of self-abuse and junkiedom. The love of being home and, of domestic warmth. It's a great song.
I didn't really deep dive into this later period. I did find it to be kind of samey.
It is. The last thing I'm going to have on the playlist, in 2018, he did Here If You Listen, which, again, I totally agree with you. It does have a saminess, but there's a song called 1967. Without knowing, I believe what it is one of those like scatting demos that he had in 67. The rest of his band just, started, they left it alone, and then they kind of come in halfway through and ride it home. And it's really cool.
This is the great thing about being a guest on the show instead of the co-host, is that when I feel like tapping out, I can just tap out.
Yeah. Yep. This stuff, no matter how you feel about it, it's at least a guy, he's trying. You can hear that.
He's definitely not embarrassing himself.
No, he's not.
Definitely not embarrassing himself. And I think holding his own, I find it inspiring and impressive that he had such a love for music, that he worked this hard at this stage in his life to get these records done.
He was working on a new record up until the day he died, apparently. So in July 2021, his final studio album came out during his lifetime for free. Again, extending the Joni accolades, because, man, that song has really woven its way, not just the song, but Joni. His respect and admiration for her is never ending. Followed by the release of the 50th anniversary expanded edition of If I Could Only Remember My Name in October of 2021. Then Crosby's final release is a live album called Live at the Capitol Theater, which was released in October of 2022. So toward the end, what characterized Crosby? I mean, he had a cannabis brand. Did you know that?
I saw that in your notes there. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
It's pretty clear cut. I mean, this is a guy who's California sober. He gave up the heroin, the cocaine, apparently, but never once did he think about giving up smoking weed, I don't think. And he said, all those hit songs, every one of them, I wrote them all on cannabis.
He stayed in good voice, too. His voice still sounds strong on all those records. Some of our aging rockers from the 60s, their voice kind of turns into a croak, but he could still sing.
How is he able to hit those high notes? All the weed smoking he's done, it's insane that he still sounds like John Anderson.
Yeah, I don't know. He just has a real kind of easy delivery singing. He's usually not like a high effort kind of singer. He's usually kind of just sings like in a very free and easy kind of style. He stayed in good voice right up until the end, I think.
So, the magic trick that he performed is that these days you can't say anything without people getting all up in your ass. I mean, look at fucking Pink Floyd just did about the 50th anniversary.
Yes, it's amazing.
It's insane. Yeah. And yet somehow, I have no fucking idea how he was able to do this for years and years. He's been cantankerous and irascible on Twitter, and people love it.
He doesn't take himself that seriously, I feel like. He's going to say what he's going to say, and it's like, hey, if you don't like it, go fuck yourself. He kind of has that attitude really about it. Kind of had the famous dust up with Phoebe Bridgers and all that. I found him to be kind of lovable.
I love him because he hated the Doors. He fucking, he rained a constant shitstorm down on Jim Morrison.
I didn't really know that. I know he made some unfortunate comments about Daryl Hannah that I think he probably regretted.
Neil was very kind in his eulogy, and he called Crosby the soul of CSNY, and he was.
Yeah. Yeah, I think but for the most part, I like we kind of touched on it earlier in the intro. He was kind of still with us, still on the scene. Kind of, he was still a guy you would talk about. He wasn't really forgotten. He was still a part of the culture.
He followed Discograffiti. I would wind up crossing paths with him more regularly than I expected to, and I was always trying to lure him into doing something.
Right.
What I really wanted to do more than anything was to do a show about Perro with him. It would have been an amazing thing, but unfortunately it never happened. I'd have to say that the last music death that hit me this hard was Carl Wilson. I think that was 96.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Somewhere around there. Carl Wilson died. I cried. There isn't a single music-related person who passed away since then that made me cry, including Crosby. But I wake up and it's like one of my first thoughts is I can't believe he passed away. And it's not going away yet. It's a tough one for me.
I mean, what a life. He really did a lot in there. Really made the most of his time. Even though his songwriting career could have been more prolific, he did so many other things too, besides just the songwriting is just kind of one aspect. We didn't really also mention he claims to be, and I guess is, the person who popularized the song Hey Joe.
Yeah, not a huge fan of Hey Joe. I'd imagine that you're a much less big fan of Hey Joe than I am even.
It's fine. People say that to me all the time. Hey Joe, where are you going with that gun in your hand? Hilarious.
Yeah, it's great.
So funny.
Now there's literally not a single reason to be on Twitter. You know, it's a big loss. It's a big hole in the music industry. And it's just really sad to me because it really felt like the guy was going to live forever. The fact that he made it to 81's obviously a stone cold miracle. And, you know, it really, over the past few days, has made me think that because these kinds of guys are dying off, that the show should maybe be more specifically about and for and including people like David, people like Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander from the Association who are in their 80s. It's of crucial importance that this music lives on, because without this, all we have is a bunch of SoundCloud rappers and whatever else is dotting the pitchfork vomit landscape at the moment.
SoundCloud rappers are kind of over at this point. It's not really a thing anymore.
Over again then. You know, there was Elvis, then there was music like this that Crosby and others like him were creating out of thin air. It never gets old for me. Everyone listening to this show right now, it never gets old for you. And so we got to do everything we can to enshrine this stuff and to live in it.
I agree. There's not really another equivalent that's quite like Crosby, who floats amongst so many different scenes and ties them all together, sort of like the way he does. He's rarely the guy in the lead up front, but he's always there just kind of making everything better. He's kind of like adding his voice and good taste.
If he touches what you do, it ineffably has a Crosby-esque flavor to it.
Yeah, it's a unique kind of talent that he has. This unique ability to sort of blend in and to just sort of improve everything that he's kind of involved with.
We're really going to miss him. It's a real sadness. You know, the music really does live on. Definitely hit up the playlist. It's pretty astounding. Joe, I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me.
Wouldn't miss it.
I appreciate that. That just about does it. Thank you so much for joining us. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to our graphic designer, TODD ZIMMER, my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Joe Kennedy, of course, who is a powerhouse entertainer of his own right, and the entire Patreon community. I love you, and this show would not exist without you. Be sure to stay tuned, because this Tuesday brings upon us another incredible episode of Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major, this time about a Long Beach outfit, Long Beach, California that is, called Creation of Sunlight, that did a nifty trick by combining splendorific candy-colored harmonies with acid rock. Not to mention, of course, this Thursday's wildcard episode as well, which is going to be episode 2 of Rick's Backyard, a discussion of REM's Document. Of course, as well, you're going to want to tune in a week from today for the very first part of We Are Stardust, We Are Over, which is about 4 Woodstock acts that didn't quite do so well after the show. This one's about Sweetwater with band expert Corbin Betleyoun. And that'll be right here in the place where we keep a very strong watch on the greatest performers and writers of all time, because we got to stick with them just as they stuck with us, because we're that kind of loyal. Stay gold, Joe Kennedy. It's Discograffiti.
Bye, everybody.